sing your song, 'cause music makes us friends, and friends like you are what we're here for, doing what we do. I wanna make you music, I wanna sing your song, yes, I want to share a good day with you and be your special friend. You and me and Beacon 303. Music, you and me and Beacon 303. The Andy Wint Show. Beacon Radio.
It's a gorgeous morning. Good morning, sunshine. This is Andy Wint, and Beacon Radio 303 was part of my life from 1979 to 1988. Here we go.
It was a love of radio. I'd heard Beacon. I was a trainee teacher in Worcestershire in the 1970s, and I heard Beacon come on the air. Was captivated by it because I'd been a fan of well thought out radio, formatted radio. I'd been a student of radio for years. I'd listened and knew all about the Pirates, knew all about American radio. When I heard Beacon, I suddenly knew these people knew exactly what they were doing. A lot of the other commercial stations, or in those days they were called independent stations, were a bit hesitant and a bit making it up as they went along. But Beacon I knew straight away. So I applied for Beacon, got turned down 20 times and more, and eventually in 1979 got an audition and went on the air, and I was there till 1988. The main one that I did, my full-time show, was 9 to midday, and that was from 1981 to 1984. In those days we rather patronisingly called it the Housewife Show, because in those days men went out to work, Goodyear, GKN, the foundries and what have you. So at 9 o'clock the demographic skewed markedly and became very female. So I took the show over. But either side of that, from 79 to 81, I'd done outside broadcast links, late nights, overnights, early mornings, and subsequent to when I left the morning show, I filled in again, did Super Gold Sunday, late nights. I was the first person to do the midnight line. I worked on Beacon Shropshire. In the background, I was also a shareholder of Beacon Radio, so I was rather watching my investment as well. Other radio stations didn't believe how Beacon did outside broadcasts. In particular, I know at the neighbouring radio station in Birmingham, the engineering team simply refused to believe that we had analogue links with Moseley transmitters and Martys up to Eves Hill in Dudley. So we'd be in Telford or we'd be at Ironbridge Gorge. We'd broadcast the signal back to Eves Hill. It would then come down the line, and you'd be on the air and be in analogue, no gaps, no 5-second gaps. So you could be wherever you wanted to be. I had somewhat of an advantage in that I had a live presentation background. I'd worked in nightclubs. I'd worked at Butlins. I was a radio Butlin announcer for 3 years, and I could handle the public. So I was Mr. Outside Broadcast. I got known for taking my show and before that going on canal boats. So we'd take the show out. Local companies would give us canal boats, and we'd work out an itinerary. So we'd be at Ortherley Junction. We'd go down to Bratchlocks at Womben. Maybe we'd be in Stourport on Severn. We'd go here, there and everywhere. We even went into Cambrian Wharf at the back of the Rep in Birmingham. So we'd go all over the place. And I knew that you could get the public along to your outside broadcasts. And the moment you build up that link and people think, oh, he's there, and you talk to people, I knew they'd work. We took my show out to people's front rooms. We went out to people's front rooms, chatted to people, brought neighbours in. In those days you had milkmen, so they'd come in, and people recognised there was an authenticity. And remember, Beacon was the first in Wolverhampton. There had never been a radio station in Wolverhampton before. So when you're the first at doing it, you make your own mould. And people wanted to know. And also the transmission area of Beacon was unusual in that it had no epicentre. So sure, we were at 267 Tettenhall Road, but we knew also we had listeners on the Welsh border. We knew we had Shrewsbury, which is now called Shrewsbury, but we knew we had listeners all over the Black Country and down into Worcestershire. So the programme director at the time said to us, look, I don't want you to imagine you're in Wolverhampton. Don't be Wolverhampton-centric. Imagine you're in a hot air balloon, 10,000 feet, and you're looking down on the area. So I don't want anyone saying down in Stourbridge or up in Telford. It's Telford and it's Stourbridge. And that's how it worked. We always thought, it was never us and them with the audience. People were listening with us, not to us. We had a very big Human League day once, and that was down to Mike Baker. When Dare, the Human League album, came out, Mike was very into his music, very into his synthesizers. Genuinely one of the best people I've ever met. On air, a consummate professional. If Mike said yes, it happened. But he also was way ahead of his time in electronics. He was an engineer, ex-IBA engineer. He was the first person I ever knew to do an OU degree. And Mike had organised to bring the Human League to 267 Tettenhall Road. And we thought, well, it was packed. There were people in the car park. It was sensational. So every day there'd be someone there. So I'd talk to, whether it was on the phone or we'd get people to come up, famous people. And part of the format of my show was to have a competition in the first hour, to have some lifestyle stuff in the second hour, and then a big name in the last hour. So everyone from it could be George Benson one day, Neil Kinnock the next, Frederick Forsyth, whoever was appearing in theatres. And again, I pronounce myself theatre correspondent, a big fan of the theatre. So I used to go everywhere on company expenses, from the Victoria Theatre in Stoke-on-Trent down to the Swan in Worcester, from the Loft in Leamington Spa right through the Coventry theatres down to the RSC, all the Birmingham theatres. I'd go and interview people. So Kenneth Branagh, doing one of his first seasons at the RST in Stratford-on-Avon, I'd take a ewer down and just talk to people. And people, they always wanted to know. And of course, the public likes big names. And that was, if you like, that was the mix. And when I started doing what was called the Housewife Show, I went out and did lots of research. I got a budget from the programme director and bought every women's magazine for a month and read all of them and did all the pagination. And one thing came through, that women like to read about women's things. They like big names. They like competitions. You look even now, look in any woman's magazine. There are horoscopes, big names, lifestyle, problem page. They're all in there. It's still the same. So we knew we had to have big names, because you could say at the start of the show, well, later on, there's Frederick Forsyth. Or later on, we're talking to Lulu. And again, Mike was very good, and Mick Wright as well, very good at getting big names to come into the radio station. And we then get maximum mileage out of them, because they'd come in and do an interview with me, maybe live at 11 o'clock. They'd be then whisked off to the studio next door to do an interview for the Late Show, pre-recorded, and then maybe Mike or Mick would then chat to them for an hour and make a special which would go out at a bank holiday or at Christmas. In 1984, I'd been doing the morning show for 3 years, and I suddenly realised I wasn't having a whale of a time, which came as a bit of a surprise, because it was what I'd wanted to do. I was a great fan of the radio station, and I suddenly realised that there were no flashbulbs popping. So I went to the boss and said, look, I want to leave. I want to leave. He said, you can't leave. We were doing very well in the ratings at the time. And I said, well, look, he said, well, take a break. Just take a break. And Beacon was part Canadian owned, by the Selkirk company. So I went to Vancouver. And had some experience at one of their radio stations in Vancouver. Had a break, and that was terrific. I came back. I then started a career as a full-time voiceover. Pre-ISDN, radio stations used to have commercial voiceovers who come into the station and voice commercials. So I was one of those. I'd go to Newcastle-on-Tyne, Stockton, Leeds, Bradford, Manchester, Liverpool, Preston, then right down to the south coast, Portsmouth, Brighton, Cardiff, Swansea, and I'd do that. And then I'd also fill in at Beacon at the weekends. Did that. I then got into aviation, started an aviation company. My company did the flying eye on BRMB. I went into partnership with a guy called Neil Gittins, who was a marketing exec at Beacon. We talked together, we started the company, we did executive charter and BRMB's flying eye. Then my good friend Mike Baker left Beacon and went to Chiltern Radio in the home counties, got a job as commercial producer, phoned me up one day at Elmdon Airport and said, there's been a change of management here. Would you fancy going back on the air? So I went to Chiltern, met Paul Robinson, the programme director, who was a Beacon fan, chatted to Mike, and I started doing breakfast on Chiltern, did that for 6 years. Left Chiltern and went to the Capital Group. I worked at Capital Gold in London. And then in 1998, I went to live in the Isle of Man. And the man who got me the job in the Isle of Man was the man who got me the audition at Beacon Radio in 1979, George Ferguson. And I went to work with George at Manx Radio, and we had as much fun as we'd had together at Beacon. And George now lives 200 yards from me. So it's full circle, really. I'm now, I was program director at Manx Radio. I left in the mid-2000s. I now work in funding entertainment projects. So in the world of entertainment, sometimes things go right and sometimes things go wrong. So if there's an entertainment or showbiz project that's in a bit of difficulty, I'm part of a team that advises, gets strategic finance and moves things towards fruition. So I've been particularly involved in television drama over the past few years. So it's interesting, but Beacon started me. You know, the Beacon was my first job, my first full-time job. I'd been at various radio stations before, but living in Compton, sharing a flat with Austin Powell in Compton, and then moving to the Lindens in Newbridge Crescent, which was strategic for me because it was, again, less than half a mile to walk to the radio station. So in those days, if I woke up at 2:00 in the morning with an idea, I would get dressed and go to the radio station, and Pete Clements or Peter Craig would be on the air, and we'd have a cup of coffee, and I'd go upstairs to production and I'd do it, and then go back downstairs at 4, 5 o'clock, go home, get changed, have a shower, and come in and do my show. And having that facility, when you've got a desire to do something, having that facility really helps.
Your face on a tea towel.
When I was doing what was called the Housewife Show, we had to think up. I invented a competition called the Song Search, which is where we gave out lyrics of a song and people had to call in. And the program director at the time, I don't think quite understood how many prizes I was going to give away, a man called Bob Pearson. And he said, how many do you think you'll give away a week? And I was running 4 rounds a morning for 5 days, so that's 20. And I said, Bob, we'll give away 5 or 6. Well, of course, we were giving 20 away a week because I was making things very simple so that people would win. So that if people won, more people would listen and think they could, and then you make it more difficult as time goes on. So we ran out of radio station sweatshirts within about a month. We were giving away albums all the time, and we ran out of those. The head of music was pulling his hair out. So the promotions man at the time was a man called Peter Noyes Thomas, said, well, do you think we should give something away that the audience will use? Well, they're housewives. So he said, well, we'll give away tea towels and aprons. And of course, everybody fell about laughing. What's anybody going to... But bless him, it was a good idea because as a piece of merchandise, it's something that would go into someone's house. You would look at it and laugh and think it's quite a novelty. You wouldn't throw it away. That was point one. You wouldn't throw it away. And secondly, it's something that people would use. Little did I know, 30 years later, I still know people who say, we wipe the dishes with your face. So I'm very grateful. I'll take anything I can get. To be part of people's domestic life, even at this advanced stage, is a sheer delight.